So I'm in Nashville. You're in Austin. You've been here a few years now, and we were just talking before we started about how wild it is when you choose where you want to live. You can live out 30 minutes outside of town, or you can live downtown, and how different the vibe is. And like, you're a city guy. You grew up in LA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, describe Austin, because there are like 15 high-rises here that I don't even remember being here like 5 years ago.
It's been incredible. Like going in year 4 now, and the growth in this city has been really incredible, whether it's the high rises, whether it's been the food scene, whatever that looks like. I mean, it's pretty awesome. But for me, like, we live about 12, 15 minutes just outside of downtown, so I have that pretty good commute back and forth. I see deer and fox every morning, but then here's downtown Austin and just a vibrant city right now. It's really cool.
And I mean, you're kind of immersed in it, so you don't talk like this, but outside the football complex, when people started saying that, if I was a realtor, I would say all that, and I would say, and you know, Texas football's kind of doing okay as well, which I got to imagine is a nice cherry on top selling point in that community. So I'm going to thank you for them, because they're not in here today.
Well, but I'm thanking them too, because we use the city of Austin recruiting for sure, because we do have a different niche. I mean, how many colleges are in a city of 1 million people with no pro sports? So we don't have an NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. So we have this awesome city, but yet it's still a college town. And there's not, if any, other places in the country that are that way. So the better Austin's doing, and how vibrant and how electric it is, and how great business is and the economy is, that's better for us too. So I think it's a two-way street for them.
How are you doing? I remember when you got here a few years ago, we had you on the show, and you talked culture then, you talk culture now.
Yeah.
You got to hammer it home every day. But I remember how much of a work in progress it felt like it was. And I'm not saying you've arrived, because no one's ever arrived on that front. But when you're around Texas now, when you talk to people inside of Texas, when outsiders talk about Texas, the tune's totally changed. And it's not just result oriented. The results have been downstream, I would imagine, of a lot of stuff you guys have rewired internally.
Well, for sure. And sometimes I tap into some of the Nick Sabanisms of his kind of stuff, because it was really impactful on me. But if you remember him, he always talked about the process. Mm-hmm. And I don't really speak in it in that term, but when you frame the question that way, like, we're not result oriented. The byproduct of a really good culture, the byproduct of recruiting really well, highly talented kids, the byproduct of never sacrificing character for talent in the people you bring into the organization, the byproduct of really living the adage of who you are some of the time is who you are all of the time. So what does that look like academically? Who are you on our community? The byproduct of that are some of the wins, and some of those wins late, right? That you find a way to win those games because you do have that culture. And so I try to appreciate where we're at, because I think that's one of the things I made a mistake about early in my career as a head coach, was it was always on to the next, the next, the next. So I've been a lot more appreciative of kind of being where my feet are and understanding, man, this has been pretty cool. This has been a great journey, right? From 5-7 to the college football playoff, and what that looked like along the way. So I don't take that stuff for granted. I don't take it lightly. But yet the fire inside him is there's more to go do, right? And I think that's the beauty of what we get to do on a daily basis.
You mentioned something there that is probably more prevalent in the portal era than just the classical recruiting era. You said you cannot sacrifice the principles and integrity of the program for talent.
Right.
And I'm always really interested when coaches talk about this, because you can, like, guys can say that, especially early in their career. Guys could say that in January or February or whatnot. But when it comes time to make a call on a guy that talent-wise could potentially alter the trajectory of your season, but you understand this guy doesn't hit critical factors from the neck-up standpoint, like, you got to make that call.
Sure.
How difficult sometimes is that call when he's got every intangible I need from a physical standpoint, but there's something missing from the neck up?
Well, I think there's a couple things to that. One, we're at a space now in year 4, we don't have to take as many risks. Early on, when you come in and you're 5-7, you're probably taking a few more risks. You're probably saying, okay, I see the talent. There might be some marginal character in here. but who else is it? Because we're having a hard time recruiting player X, Y, and Z who have it all, who are all buttoned up. And so you take a few more risks early on. Now in year 4, we don't have to take those risks. And the beauty of not having to take those risks is this. I've got 120 18 to 22-year-old sons on our team. And as great of character as we are, not every one of them are going to, they're going to make some mistakes. I was in college, we were in college, that's the way it goes. And so if you can minimize some of that going into it, I think the better off, because the kids that really truly expose themselves, that don't have the great character, I don't know if they're going to be the reason why you win a championship. They might help you win a couple games here and there, but they'll surely contribute to the reason of why your program and your culture and your locker room falls apart. And that's how it spreads. It can spread with one person so quickly. So we do our due diligence on that. And I think we can. I think we've earned that now. And so when you make that decision, it's, again, I feel like we don't have to take too big of risks. And that's where my judgment comes in. And my judgment kicks into what is his true character as opposed to maybe did he make a mistake or two. And that's where you got to kind of draw that line. And then hopefully you know him well enough, you know the family well enough, you know the high school coach well enough to where you can get to the bottom of that to make a consciously good decision.
I was looking back at some of our notes when you first got here about what we were saying on the show about Texas in the spring. And I remembered, I had my memory jogged, there was a time not too long ago where you guys couldn't even do spring games as you wanted because the depth chart was a wreck.
Yeah.
And now this past spring, you guys had one of the most entertaining spring games because you could go at it the way you want to. Can you please, like in layman's terms for the folks at home and me, describe how different the depth is here compared to what you inherited?
Well, just that was year 1, year 2. We couldn't play a spring game, and the reason was I would have 7, maybe 8 offensive linemen total that could physically go compete in a game. This year in spring practice, we had 17 to 19 to 20. I mean, when you start adding up the walk-ons and so on and so forth. So now you can play a real game. And that goes across the board, whether it's having enough receivers, having enough defensive linemen. Now, I think a couple things have contributed to that. One, I think we've structured our roster in a way to where we have equality in depth across the board. It's not just 1 or 2 position groups that are loaded. We've kind of assembled it in a way that is lateral. But 2, I think the portal has helped that, where you can bring some players in mid-year to get yourself in the right space for spring practice. But the other thing that's changed a lot in college football that people aren't talking as much about, more and more kids are graduating high school early. More and more kids are graduating they're signing in December and they're showing up on your campus in January. We had 18 freshmen show up in January who should still be in high school that are now competing in spring practice, that are competing in winter conditioning drills, that are getting a semester of school under their belt, which I think is huge for us. Because as you look ahead into this season and why depth is so important, we're going to play our first game August 31st, which is really early in college football world. The national championship's not till January 20th, and we're not getting that month off like you would in December because of the college football playoff. You may have to play 16, 17 games. We are going to need all the depth that we can have and to generate, and we're going to have to play young players early to try to be at our best after Thanksgiving.
I think when guys talk about how relentless you have to be in recruiting, it goes over heads sometimes because the general public is used to being conditioned in preview magazine fashion.
Right.
When the preview magazine comes out, everybody's healthy. And your starting 22 look great. And preseason expectations are based on that. But then what you're talking about is by the time week 2 of November is there's red Sharpie all throughout that depth chart. And then you add in that you may have to play 1 or 2 games on top of what you used to have to play to win a title. You can't forecast injury, but like how relentless and like how up late at night do you have to be sometimes mentally to make sure we are stocked at these positions, knowing the inevitable is coming, but not knowing where it's coming?
Well, I think that, and I think the other thing is making sure that you're versatile enough twofold. Are you recruiting versatile enough players, guys that can play multiple positions, so that you can get your best players on the field, whether it's in the secondary, on the defensive line front, your tight ends, things of that nature. And then two, are you versatile enough schematically as a staff to utilize the personnel that is available to you in December? Because it's not going to be the same as it was in August. And so the idea that maybe we need to be in more 12 personnel, or maybe we need to be in more 2-back, or maybe we need to be in more 11, or maybe we just need to play nickel and dime on defense and base defense is out the window, or all our DBs are shot. Do you have the ability to play more base defense, even versus some of the 11 personnel stuff? Like we have to be versatile that way as a staff, and we can't just get versatile in November and December. We have to prepare our players for that stuff in August as we're going through training camp to get ready, so that if we have to go down a different road, they've been exposed to it. Maybe I've got a Jade Barron who plays nickel for us. I need him to play corner or safety. Well, we need to expose him to those things in training camp so that if we do that, he's comfortable enough to do it.
Do you think you'll ever have a better quarterback situation going forward than you have right now, where folks are terrified elsewhere in the country that if they're go, first off, their guy may not be good enough, but if their guy goes down, they're screwed. And you're sitting here with Arch Manning, you got a good quarterback room, and I've been able to describe you that way multiple years now. How sweet is that?
It's awesome. It's the most difficult and the most important position in sports for a reason, right? You just think about the great teams. Very few great teams have won championships, NFL, college, high school. We've been covering this sport forever, that didn't have a really good quarterback. And he may not always be the most talented, but he was the leader, or he was the toughest, or he was the guy that everyone could count on. Like that position encompasses so much that we recruit it that way. We recruit it as if it's the most important position, and it's not always about the talent. It's not, playing quarterback and being a great quarterback is not about how far you throw it or how well you throw a slant route. That's a piece to the puzzle. What type of leader are you? What type of work ethic do you have? How do you relate to everybody in that locker room? How do you relate to your community? Do you instill belief in every person in our building when we go take the field that we are going to win this game? That's what the greatest quarterbacks have. And that's what we try to look for in recruiting, and then that's what we try to develop when we get them here. And we've had a decent amount of success over the years, and I think this is another great room. I mean, having Quinn back for his third year is huge. Watching his growth and maturation over 3 years has been incredible. Just looking at Arch from year 1 to year 2 and to see how far he's come. And then we've got a young player in Trey Owens who we think is going to be a really good player as well. So we like the room. You knock on wood. You hope you don't have to go to all those guys that on the depth chart. But a year ago we did, and we were able to find a way to win a couple games with a backup quarterback starting.
Go back last year, really the last 2 years, you guys played Bama in a home-and-home.
Yep.
And we're at both games. Electric atmospheres both times. Close game here, it goes their way. But then you go there a year later, and they don't hand you a trophy for a regular season win. But, I remember talking to Josh Heupel about when they beat them at Tennessee a couple of years ago and how seminal a moment it was for the energy of the fan base and for the messaging of how we can sell our program. There's no more projecting. We're showing you, we can do it. We can take down the best of the best. From that standpoint, what kind of effect did that win on the road last year have on just the organization and then the broader scope of Texas football overall?
Well, I think it was big. I had to put it into perspective for some of our players even to think when we went in there that night, they were 52-1 in their previous 53 games at home under Coach Sabin, and the only loss was to Joe Burrow and LSU, the national champion, and I was on that sideline with Alabama. To think Nick Saban's never gotten beat at home by double digits in 18 years until that game. To think that was the first non-conference team to go in there and beat them in over a decade. So there was a lot of, to put it into perspective for our players, I think was huge. But more importantly, I think for us, I think over the last decade and a half, there's been some great teams that have come into DKR and Texas has played them well and won, their fair share. But to go on the road into the SEC, where we're headed, to play the team that has dominated that conference over the last 2 decades, and to go win that game in that fashion, and also because I think it was important too. That's where I had come from, and that the fact of this is what we were trying to build to go compete with those teams. Before we even knew we were going to the SEC, we said we had to build a team that could beat Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame, the teams that are historically in the college football playoff. And the fact that we could assemble a team that could go on the road in a hostile environment at night in Tuscaloosa, beat that team. And then I laugh when everyone said, well, it's not the same Alabama anymore. Well, they were in the college football playoff again, and we're a play away from playing for another national championship. So, year in and year out, that's the consistency that Coach Sabin had gotten that program to. That's obviously what we're striving for. But I think it was a great check mark on our journey for a lot of people to look back at that game. It was like, okay, now we've assembled the team, the culture that can go achieve that. Now how do we find that level of consistency to do it year in and year out?
What was your immediate reaction when you heard about Nick Saban's retirement?
That was a wild day. I can't remember the order, but it was Nick Saban and Pete Carroll on the same day.
Yeah, sure was.
And for me, those were 2 men that completely impacted not only my coaching career, but me as a man. I had worked for Pete Carroll for 7 years. And he really got me into the industry. I GA'd for him, and then I kind of worked my way up with him. And then Coach Sabin, when I was out of work, him extended an olive branch to me to get me back into it as an analyst, brought me back as a coordinator. So both those guys were really impactful to me, and so. I don't want to say I wasn't surprised, because I know Coach Sabin doesn't do anything on a whim, right? He's a thoughtful man, and neither of those guys. And so when it occurred, he just felt like it was the time. It was still hard to kind of chew on. Even today, I'll be honest with you, it's hard to kind of chew on that. And I love Kalen. Kalen's an awesome coach, and he's done a fantastic job. But it not being the straw hat at practice for Alabama is, I think, going to take time for everybody. And so, but love him to death. I know he's doing great. I talk to him, quite, periodically, and still bounce ideas off him. He's still the GOAT in my opinion. So, but I know he's doing great, and it was fun to watch him doing the NFL draft. He just looks so relaxed.
Like he's done it before.
Like he's been doing it his whole life. I'm like, this guy, but that's him. He's always going to work at his craft to be the best at what he does.
I'll be interested if you think this way. So he had a really big voice in the room for head coaches, period, especially SEC coaches. And I'm not saying that he won't, but he's no longer an active head coach. And so, like, when you guys are on coaches' meetings, when you're in Destin later this month,
right.
When you're talking about pressing matters at hand, that voice that used to be the one everyone's kind of looking to the left or right waiting to speak up may not be there anymore. And you got a full plate running Texas football. Do you view your role as being at one of the major programs to speak above and beyond Texas, like to speak for the betterment of college athletics, or can you even afford to spend time on that?
I guess that's a fine line there. I love college football, and I mean that, and I've never wavered off of that. Like, we have an awesome sport, and we have a sport that captivates our country, not just every Saturday, but for months at a time. And there's so much pride in what we do, and the regular season matters, and it counts, and the fan bases. It's an incredible sport, and to me, it's at an all-time high right now. I mean, what people are loving about college football, the ratings, it's incredible. And I know we've got a lot of moving parts right now, and whether it's the portal, conference realignment, NIL, whatever, all the stuff that's potential revenue sharing. What is all this going to look like? But in the end, we still have an amazing sport. And that's my big thing of, like, everybody's going to complain. One side's going to complain, the other side's going to complain. I try to get back to, hey, we got it pretty good. Yeah, we've got it pretty good right now. And so I try to look at it from a 10,000-foot view as much as I can. And then where are we in that? And then how does that affect the University of Texas? And how do I kind of do both? But Coach Sabin was great at that. You know, I always say, you know, he looked at it from a 10,000 foot view, but the Crimson Tide was on his mind, everything that he was suggesting, you know, in the end. And I think Kirby has gotten into that space now. You know, he's earned that. He's done a great job, and what he's done at Georgia. I think Brian Kelly in our own conference, because of his experience and how long he's been doing it. So there's a lot of coaches, and everybody's perspective is different. You know, Lane's perspective is totally different at an Ole Miss as compared to, you know, where Brian Kelly's is at LSU, or mine for that matter, or Kirby's. Kalen DeBoer's perspective is going to be totally different now, having now just getting to Alabama. So I think those ideas, and there's a lot of smart people in that room for us, sharing those ideas and then getting to a common ground where we're like, okay, this is in the best interest of college football. Sometimes it's not always in the best interest of Texas, but it's in the best interest of college football. So let's move forward with that. There's other times you stand on that hill and you fight for the thing that you believe in, because you know, I really don't want to give that up. And so that's the beauty of being in the Southeastern Conference and you know, Commissioner Sankey and his leadership, but also the men in that room as coaches and the expertise that they have.
I think about when you were at Bama and where you are now, and not that there's a lot of historical precedent, because like no one has your exact story.
Right.
But historically, let's just say broad strokes purposes, someone is taking the path that you took.
Right.
Typically, there would be a stop between Bama and Texas, maybe like a G5 head coaching job,
Right.
maybe a lower level P4 now coaching job. But you went Bama to Texas, and then the entire sport changed. And now I look at the plight of G5 head coaches, where the better they do, the more likely maybe their roster is to get raided post-spring.
Right.
Like there's nothing they can do about it.
I know.
And you throw your hands up. I mean, you're in one of the most blessed positions in college football, not just because you get to do what you love, but you get to do what you love at one of the premier programs in America. Do you ever, I know you talk to some of them, but do you ever like think, man, how would my operation and approach have to be different if I was on this rung of the ladder instead of the rung I'm on?
No doubt. Like I got the job here and college football started to change.
Boom.
Like, I remember thinking to myself, after when I first got here, we didn't have the portal, the transfer portal. I'm like, man, that would have been nice to have had. You know, we went into the season under-numbered of scholarships. We just didn't, because we couldn't replenish.
At Texas.
Yeah, we couldn't replenish because so many guys had left and declared for the draft and transferred. And then they were capping you at 25. I couldn't bring in enough players. I was just reflecting on that. Like, that would have been a lot nicer if I had that. But also I shift gears and I do talk to buddies of mine that are coaches at those places. And the idea that year in and year out, they're on like a ladder of, okay, here's 2, 4, 6 of my better players that are literally getting recruited off my team from other schools because, you know, allegedly people don't pre-portal, right? But the reality is that's what's happening. Okay, so how do they then manage, all right, there they go, recruiting high school, but then they're looking too of maybe who's on our rosters at this level of guys that want the opportunity to play. I think that's important too. It's like we've all got pretty good players. Only so many of them can play. And now as guys get a little older, junior, seniors, they're just looking for an opportunity to put good film out there so they can have an opportunity to go play in the National Football League. And so they're monitoring that too. And so everybody's looking at everybody else. And my biggest thing is like, that's important, it is. But man, we got to make sure that we're looking internally too. And how we're developing our players here too. How we're treating our players here, not only on the field, but off the field. How we're developing them. Because we want to make it as hard as possible for our guys to want to leave. That they're getting developed, they're getting treated well enough, they're getting coached up, they're playing in great schemes, they've got a great locker room culture, they're getting a first-class education, they get to live in the city of Austin. Like, I want to make it so dang hard for them to leave that if that moment comes where they feel like that's just in the best interest that for me to go, that it should almost bring them to tears that, you know, this place meant that much to them.
Do you ever, when that happens, when a guy leaves, and then you're in your office, you shut the door behind you, it's just you. If I were you, I would probably speak ill of someone. Or I would think, how can you not get this? Like, I would want to grab someone by the shoulders and I want to shake them and say, like, how do you not get this? Because you've lived in this game for a long time.
Yeah.
I've immersed myself in it for a long time. You know what a have looks like. You know what the have-nots look like.
Yeah.
And maybe a 17 or 18-year-old doesn't always, because they haven't been around the block. But when you see what a place like Texas affords you,
right,
or what a place like Georgia or Bama or Ohio State affords you, and then you think to look at all that and to say, nah, no thanks, I'm good, I'm going to go somewhere else. You've done all you can do. Like, there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah.
But do you just sometimes think, like, are you serious?
Well, you know, a lot of a couple things is we live in a society of instant gratification, okay? And social media hasn't made that any better. It kind of escalated that. It's like, you know, I want to buy something, I go on Amazon and I order it, you know, or I go to Instacart. I go to one of these apps. I can just, you know, DoorDash and Uber Eats. Like, you know, I need to get somewhere. No longer do you have to call a buddy for a ride because I don't have my car. I call Uber, you know, I call Lyft or whomever it is. And so it's like that's our world. And unfortunately, we inherit the kids that grew up in this world now, and they all want to play. Nobody is disagreeing with you wanting to play, but whether it's our program, any other one, nobody's going to give you playing time. You earn that playing time. And sometimes that playing time doesn't get earned until year 2, year 3, maybe even year 4. But there's this idea of what we've lost, in my opinion, as a society is the ability to persevere when things aren't going your way. And then through hard work, through mental toughness, through some resiliency, you work towards it. And then it's even more gratifying when you do get that. And the easy one is Mac Jones. I mean, what he did at Alabama for 3 years to get his one shot, nobody was more grateful for that opportunity than Mac Jones because of the work that he put in. But how many quarterbacks nowadays are going to sit around and wait for 3 years before they get their chance to play their 4th year of college? It doesn't happen, right? And I get a chuckle out of this. Everyone's praising Arch for staying at Texas. He's going into year 2. Like, what do you mean?
What a veteran, man.
But that's the mentality of and our locker room's not a whole lot different than everybody else's. But that's the mentality. Good for Arch. He's sticking it out with Texas in year 2, and I'm like, yeah, that's part of the process. Like, we're developing him to be a great football player and a great leader, and he's going to be. But that's where we're at right now, you know. And so I think that's a little bit unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. Like, you know, Coach Saban's got the greatest line ever: adapt or die. Yeah. There's a reason dinosaurs aren't on the earth anymore. They couldn't adapt. And so we've continually had to adapt in the way we talk to our players, the way we develop them, the way we try to find them opportunities to play and find niches that they can do to get them on the field. But I'm never going to back off of trying to develop them as men. And if we don't learn the value of perseverance here, how are we going to do it in the real world? You know, what's going to happen when the chips are against you in the real world? You can't transfer in the real world. You got to work your way through. You got to show some resiliency. You got to put forth a little bit more extra. You got to be a little bit more disciplined. You got to be a little bit more committed to whatever that cause is. And so there is no transfer portal in the real world, right? And I'm not saying that transfer portal's bad. Hey, it's helped the University of Texas. I'll be honest with you. I'll be the first one to tell you. But we can't just rely on that as that's the out. And let's make sure we're exhausting ourselves before we say, all right, the portal, coach, it's time for me to go. And then I can close my door in my office and sit there and say, hey, you know what? We did everything we could for him, and you know, this was in his best interest to move on and to find a new home.
Here's what sucks in my space. So if I try and say that, I get accused of being anti-player because people hear what they want to hear instead of what you say. Like, you can be in two truths at one time. You can be pro ability for guys to move, but also pro them using it as a last resort, but that's got to be on them. You're kind of basically, you're doing the same thing I'm doing right now, and that you're giving opinion on the way you hope guys are wired mentally, while also saying, but if you're not, there's the water slide, you can hop on it, you go wherever it takes you. I don't know if you've noticed this, but it seems to me there are a lot of people in the space right now with a lot of ulterior motives, And some are on the NIL side of the fence, maybe profiting from it, and some are just moonlighting as agents, even though they're not accredited by anyone. And so it's in their best interest to just continue to take a baseball bat to the beehive. And then you've got voices saying what you're trying to say, and sometimes I try and echo that same sentiment, and you can't even get the sentence out of your mouth without someone saying, "Are you saying players shouldn't have those rights?" No one's saying that.
Right.
So that's what I deal with. It's kind of a little commentary.
But the thing is, it's like, as we're moving, as college football and college athletics are shifting and changing, and it's all happening. Sometimes we need to lean into the people that have been the experts in this space for decades. Professional sports in a lot of ways has figured a lot of this stuff out. And sometimes, if we want to minimize, the guys as moonlighting as agents, well, let's only deal with accredited agents, right? If you're not an accredited agent through any professional sport, whether it's the NFL, Major League Baseball, then you can't speak on a player's behalf in college. Have we ever thought about that? No, because we're still playing catch up. We're still trying to get the lay of the land here. But that's just one simple thing. It's like we have got to start to settle our feet down, and we will. And college football, change is a good thing as long as we make the necessary adjustments and get this thing right. And so whether it's the portal, whether it's NIL, whether it's conference realignment, whether it becomes revenue sharing, we're going through this thing together, and hopefully that we've got people in place, which I believe that we do, that in great leadership to navigate us through it and then settle this all down to say, okay, this is the direction we're going in. I want what's best for our players, and they work their tail off, and the opportunities that they're getting, I'm super excited for them. But there's also other opportunities that don't have a monetary value on them that I think college football offers them that's going to help them in life. And there is no value to put on that, right? It's what we got what I got as a player. I mean, I played for Lavelle Edwards. Those 2 years I had at BYU with him were priceless to me. That helped shape me for what I've become. And I think we all could speak to coaches that we've had and experiences in college that we've had, teammates that we've had that impact us. And so that's above and beyond just a value of NIL or playing time, because I think we learn a lot about ourselves through adversity. And so hopefully as we get in this and as we navigate through it, we get to a space where everybody's comfortable. Not everybody has to be happy, as long as everybody's comfortable with the space that we're in college athletics.
Are you familiar with what a gas station recruiting war is?
No.
No, that's good.
I feel like I don't do that. I don't know. I don't know. I've never.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
I would know it probably if that was something I did.
Well, I was going to ask you, so you're in the state of Texas. So depending on like the portion of the country you're in, there are places that are big deals. Like Buc-ee's is a really big deal in Texas.
Yeah, big deal.
But do you ever actually get to go in one? Because that would be a scene if you walked into one.
I stopped at one last week. I was driving back from Houston, and I stopped at Buc-ee's. I didn't get anything though. I just kind of walked in real quick and I looked around because I had never been at this particular Buc-ee's, and it's fascinating. I mean, just massive. And then I got back in my car and I kept trucking.
Which brings me to my next point. So I'm currently finding myself in about an 8-way bidding war in my own gas station recruiting battle. I'm going to partner with one of these brands this fall. And every other big voice at the table, and Buc-ee's has been MIA. And I don't get it because I'm very loyal to them, or have been in the past. And so any advice on handling my recruitment, when I don't have one offer that I would love to have on the table, would be very much appreciated.
Well, but I think about this from a player's perspective, right? Let's call it, we're the University of Texas, and I only get to sign, 25 players a year. And in the state of Texas, there's hundreds of players that are going to go play Division I football, or football in general at various universities. And so now I've got coaches out spring recruiting, and there's the kid. He's a really good player. We know he's a good player, but we're trying to figure out, are we going to offer him or not? Like, how do we go through it? And then inevitably we do, because, okay, it's the right fit, but now the kid's upset with us because it took us too long. Because everybody else is just, oh, he's a kid in Texas, he must be good, go offer him. But there's no substance behind the offer. right? And then when you do go to commit to that school, and then they tell you can't commit because that wasn't a committable offer, right? So what kind of offer do you want from Buc-ee's? Right?
You think they may give me the non-committable?
They could very easily, just to get in the game, and then let's feel it out. So you got to figure that out.
I mean, there's no coming back from that.
Our offers that come from me are committable, and so now who's offering you that? That's the thing you got to figure out. Who at Buc-ee's is offering you?
So I may need to dance with a girl that was there with me at the beginning.
I think there might be something to be said for that. Or make sure you're getting the right type of offer.
This is deep. This is really deep. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, a couple more things here
You got it.
that we're going to get right back on the track of football with. When you guys go to the playoff last year, a lot of people are experiencing that for the first time in your organization. You had been there before. How much of a learning process is that for your players, your people in your organization? And it didn't go the way you wanted it to on the field, but how much better equipped do you feel like you are in the future because you've been through that whole thing?
Well, I think if it nothing else, we tasted it. And everybody, it was so good, they wanted again. And so it really is serving as an awesome piece of motivation throughout the winter, throughout spring ball, heading into summer. Because it didn't go the way we wanted to, and because we were so close, I think it served as great motivation. The same way maybe the Bama game served from 2 years ago. Wait, that was Alabama, and we lost on a last-second field goal. Let's keep doing what Coach is talking about, and then let's try to take the next step. And so I think it's been part of the progression as the program, as we've grown from year to year to year. Yeah, that stung and it hurt to walk off the field, New Orleans not winning. But I think inevitably what's come out of it, we've got a really hungry football team that wants to get back to that stage and see if they can overcome that.
Everyone is going to be talking about you guys and OU going to the SEC, but they're talking about it at like 50,000 feet. Oh, how great it's going to be. Oh, how amazing it's going to be, which I agree with. But when you get into the weeds of like the practical things that go along with that, what is it, if anything, that you specifically have to focus on? Or is it just, we're going to play the teams on our schedule, let's go?
Well, I think one of the challenges is, beyond just the schedule, it's getting to know the rosters, getting to know the coaching staffs. You get into the routine in your conference, being in the Big 12 of, okay, there's Matt Campbell, there's their style of defense. Okay, there's Coach Dykes, there's Dave Aranda, right? There's Coach Kleiman, there's Coach Leipold, and then their style, and you get to know them. When you transition to a new conference, there's a lot of information that we've got to wrap our brain around and get a lay of the land of, to help us prepare, right? In training camp, what are we going to have to get prepared to play against when the season rolls around? That's probably the biggest shift, right? Of getting acclimated to maybe they're not on the schedule, but we might play Ole Miss. So what is Lane's offense looking like in P. Golding? Or we're not playing LSU, but what is Brian Kelly doing at LSU, or Josh Heupel at Tennessee? So you're looking at your own schedule, but then if you can make it to that game, of just making sure you're preparing your team. Schematically, that's one thing. I think recruiting is a whole nother thing, right? Because where our niche was in Texas and in and around Texas, and maybe a little into Louisiana, now being the Southeastern Conference, now we're sweeping all the way across, right? I-10 and take you over there. And so you have to adjust some of that too, because not only do we want to recruit our great state of Texas, it's critical to our success, and now nobody can say, why would you go to Texas? You have to play in the Big 12, right? So we kind of get that back. But we also now can broaden our stroke a little bit to the Southeast, which I think is good for us.
So when we come out of spring here, a lot of coaches are on the road as we speak right now recruiting. You're doing the speaking engagement circuit, but eventually summer workouts and then fall camp gets here.
Yeah.
What did you guys exit spring with the biggest red Sharpie circle focus on, of saying this right here, that right there, like that's probably going to decide whether we get where we want to go this fall or not?
Well, I think the biggest one is when you lose those two defensive linemen and then the interior of your front with Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat, how do you replace? And I think one thing that we've come out of it saying, okay, we've got a couple high-level players, but we don't have to replace them with just two players.
Right.
That I think our depth is really important. And so that was something that we tried to attack in the portal, just to solidify the depth of playing more people and not having to rely on just those two. But I think we've got some players that are ready to develop. Neither of those two guys had ever started a game until last season either. And so the fact that we've got some young players in our program that are growing up, I love where Alfred Collins is at, Vernon Broughton, what they can do, and some of the growth of our other players. So that was one area. And then on the offensive side of the ball, we lost 3 NFL receivers, right, and an NFL tight end. And so getting that continuity back for Quinn, whether, again, it was in the transfer portal with Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden, whether it's with the 3 young players that we had that were the only returning scholarship receivers in Jonte Cook, Ryan Niblett, DeAndre Moore, or the high school ranked kids and Ryan Wingo, guys of that nature. So we've got to get that continuity at an all-time high because that's what's going to be needed in those big games that's going to come down to. The precision has got to be critical in the passing game, and you've got to be able to create those explosive plays. And I think that was part of the reason why we beat Alabama, but I think that was also part of the reason we lost to Washington. Washington hit those big plays against us. We didn't hit enough of them against them.
Final question. It's still several months away, but how many people are going to hit you up that weekend Georgia comes here and you got the F1 race here?
Yeah.
How many favors will be called in that weekend?
I'm sure plenty, but my thing is this. My first question is, do you have a hotel room? Because if you don't have a hotel room, you can't come to the game anyway. I don't know where you're going to go. And so it's obviously a great weekend in Austin that weekend. It's going to be pretty electric. The thing for us, which will be different, we have the Red River Showdown the week before against OU.
Yeah.
So we're going right from Dallas and the State Fair and all that game entails right back to Austin for Georgia the next week in the F1 race and all that's going to be going on in Austin. So there's a lot of things happening in and around that. But that's the beauty of now the SEC, and that's the challenge that you get to have in this conference week in and week out, and that's where the depth is so critical.
I said last thing. This is the last thing for real. At the OU-Texas game, you're in the locker room at halftime, but if you've got a field media pass, that place is so perfectly configured that you can watch the first half. You can run up that ramp that goes outside. You can go funnel cake. You can go some fair games. You can get back in there in time for the third quarter. And you were talking about how great college football is earlier. You're right, because there's no other place on earth that you could do that.
To me, and I've been part of some great games.
It's awesome.
And I have. There's no better game than Texas OU at the Cotton Bowl, the State Fair. It is incredible. And for anybody who's never been to that game, you need to go to that game.
Yes.
It is incredible.
Perfect cap. Coach, we appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Buddy.